Hi, I'm Terrell Sanders. Welcome to the MinistryCOM Webcast. Sorry for our late start. We're using some new web streaming software today, and it decided it didn't want to work with us and it wanted us to reboot the machine. So we're rebooted. We're on the air now. I'm the Executive Director of MinistryCOM. Today we've got James Dalman with us in our webcast. He's going to be talking about logos and branding and why they aren't the same thing. But before we do that, I want to talk for a minute about MinistryCOM. Some of you might not be familiar with MinistryCOM. This is a national organization for supporting church communications professionals. We do a national conference. We'll be in October. We'll be in Dallas this year on October 20th and 22nd. 20th is a Wednesday. We have a mega church tour of churches there in the Dallas area. 21st, 22nd is the conference itself. The details are online at MinistryCOM.org. This is the only national conference really for church communications people. We've got a technology track. We've got a marketing track. A lot of good material for you here. We've also got in our website a large library of content from past years, from the last 5 years. Currently, we're revamping our website. We're converting this from paying for the content piece by piece. We're converting it to a membership where you join the website and you can get all the content. So hopefully next week we'll have that stuff up and running for you. We present these webcasts on the third Thursday of every month, except for October. We'll be at MinistryCOM that month. They are recorded, so these will be available to you afterwards. The purpose is to provide educational resources for people that can't make our conference. And also we want to help support local groups. So we want to see local groups come together and view these together, whether they're live or whether they are recorded. We want these to be available for you to get, build some friendships with your other members there. So I hope that if you're watching this either live or as a recording, I hope that you can, next month get together with some people and form a local group. James is going to talk to us for about 30 minutes. At the end of this, we'll have a Q&A session. There is on the chat window here. If you want to log into the chat window, you can ask questions there. If you prefer, you can send emails to info@MinistryCOM.org, and then we'll take questions in a little while. So feel free to ask your questions while we're going through this. So James Dalman is our guest today. James is the founder, entrepreneur of the Branding Shed. I think his title is Branding Dude.
Branding Dude.
Branding Dude is his title. He's pretty much a guru at everything, and humility is one of those.
Yeah.
If you don't think he's a guru, if you don't think he's a guru, just ask him. He'll tell you all about it. But James has got a lot of experience with branding. He's done a lot of work with churches, especially church plants. Mm-hmm. He's a speaker at MinistryCOM this year talking about building websites. But we will have sessions this year on church marketing and on church logo design. But James is going to talk to us a little bit about, I guess our topic today is church branding is not just a logo.
Right.
Give us some of your experience on church branding and church logos and some of the messes people get into with that.
Okay. Before I get into that, I do want to say a little bit about MinistryCOM. If I can do a little plug here, is last year we had it at Chicago. The year before that was Quail Springs Baptist Church, I believe.
City, right?
Okay. I got to the Oklahoma City one. That was my first dealing with MinistryCOM as attendee, and I just want to tell people out there who are watching this today that MinistryCOM is a very awesome deal. At first I wasn't sure, what would be going on because we had talked several times about what you're doing. And I've always had an interest and support of what you're doing to help ministries and churches learn how to communicate clearly and to get the gospel out there. So when we came out to Oklahoma City, it was a great experience, and I think the thing that was great about it was not only did we get to learn about branding and logos and websites and illustration, all that kind of stuff, but just the community. I got to meet a lot of really great people. I think a lot of people were able to form, networks and relationships, which I think is one of the benefits of coming out to MinistryCOM, is that not only can you be there to pray with each other and talk about what's going on in your ministries, but also that you can network with resources, ideas, and so I look forward to being there again this year. I'm excited to meet with people in the community and who are, doing the stuff in the trenches every day. So I'm sorry I didn't, intend to come out here and give a spiel about MinistryCOM, but I was really excited the year that I got out there a couple years ago and all the good stuff that was going on there. So
I'll always let you say good things about MinistryCOM.
I believe in it. I want everyone to get out there. So, one of the things we're talking about today, we'll get on topic now because I know we have such a short time, is, ministry branding takes more than a logo is what we're talking about this. And so many churches, church planners, people in ministries think that branding is just a logo. If we throw out this really cool logo with a dove or a cross, sunshine, whatever it is, the helping hand, that's an effective brand. But a logo indeed is not a brand. And so I want to talk about, the difference between the two, and share with our viewers and everything today the difference too, as well as some great samples of church brands, and then probably do some, give you some tips and everything before we leave, the program and do our question and answer. But church branding is about the experience that people have with a church, whether it's your church or somebody else's. Church branding is the overall experience. It's not just a logo. So when you talk about the moment that you walk into a church, people are forming an opinion about you, and that's a part of the brand. And one of the things, I don't know if you know this or not, but I went through church plant training with Acts 29, awesome network. As well as with the Evangelical Covenant Church. And one of the things that we had to do as we're researching and learn how to church plant is we had to go out to different churches and evaluate exactly what they were doing right and what they were doing wrong. And, from the moment we drove into the parking lot and saw the signs to the experience of walking through the doors to the worship, from worship to leaving, how was that experience? How was that brand? How was it all done? And then we'd kind of go back and we'd, write down the positives and the negatives. And so, one of the things through that is I learned that very quickly. I haven't always been a branding guy. I always knew it was about the experience, everything that has to do with your business. When we're talking about business, it's your letterhead, the way you answer your phone calls, how you react to people on the computer, all that kind of stuff. And when we were doing the church plant stuff, it was amazing to how many churches sent different messages from the time you drove into the parking lot to the time you left. And so, there's a lot of components that go together, and you want to blend that experience or that relationship with you from the get-go. So I'm just going to throw out some different examples here. And we'll tie it all in. I'll bring it in for a landing. But for example, some of the churches we went to, you would go to their parking lots and their signs look different than the brochures, and the brochures look different than their handouts and then their welcome packets. And so you actually felt at times that you were getting materials. They would give you this welcome pack, and everything, from that time that you're walking around, you were going to like 10 different churches. And I'm like, what's this about?
Is this the same place I got the brochure from?
Men's ministry. This looks like a whole nother church. And so, a lot of those churches we went to, bless their hearts, they were doing the best with what they were given and trying to be creative and, do some awesome stuff. But the thing was, I was confused. And one of these churches was a really well-known church. It was probably in 1,000, 2,000 mark. And so they were beyond that church plant stage. But I tell you, I went to their welcome, whatever, that rack that has all their stuff, and I thought there was it's like when you go into a hotel and you see all those brochures, out there, it's like, what's going on here? So, the church branding deal is that you want to make your image, your communication consistent across the board, from your parking signs to your welcome banner to everything on the inside, even your worship service. If you're selling that you're a cutting edge church and you're kind of radical, which I've seen a lot of churches do this. We're really cool. And then you walk into their church and it's, a bunch of old people and the music's really soft and there's no electric guitars. So there's nothing wrong with that. God needs all kinds of different people to make his church go, and different worship styles and services. So, I'm not getting in a theological debate about what's right and wrong, but you want to communicate exactly who you are. And when you're talking about branding a church, whether it's a church plant, a church who's maybe in the middle of their life, or even an older church, you want to make sure that you're communicating that accurately across all platforms. Your website, needs to be consistent with your image. Your message needs to be consistent. Your sermon series, which might be different, needs to kind of blend with who you are. So again, everything needs to tie in. It needs to communicate clearly. It needs to paint an accurate picture of who you are. Now, let's talk about the logo stuff, because I want to go about some logo thoughts as well. A lot of people think that branding has to do with the logo. Obviously you see behind us the MinistryCOM logo, Webcast. It's awesome. And, it identifies who you are. You got the TV on there. That's great. And you have your logo identifier type logos, which, obviously have the image. Think of the Nike swoosh or the Apple, things like that. And then you have words that stand out, maybe like BMW uses their symbol and their typography. So the logo can implement different features to to communicate what that church is about. But that logo does not tell the complete story of who your church is. Now, do you need to have an effective logo that communicates who you are? Absolutely. One of the things I see with a lot of younger logo designers and developers is that they'll create a logo that doesn't really necessarily capture the essence or the soul of what that church is about. So that's just one important piece of the puzzle that needs to be accurate. You need to have someone who can communicate that. They can paint that. And, you know, if you look at some of the church logos that are out there and even, you know, corporate logos, a lot of them that have been done by professional people who charge what they're worth really say a message through their logo, whether it's an identifier, through the font, you know, how they've, you know, done something with the name. And that's important. And you want to make that accurate, but you also want to make sure that that logo also embodies everything else that you're going to do when it comes to your church brand. So let's just talk about, for example, when you're talking about church branding, you want your logo to look great. It needs to communicate who you are, but also that brochure needs to fit the style for that logo. Your letterhead needs to fit the style for that logo. Your signage, your website, your business cards. And then also, there's a lot of small things that people don't necessarily count when it comes to church brand. And you know this being in business for a long time, from how you answer the phone, how you present your worship service, or, you know, different things like that, how you interact with people in the public. Are you when you're in the community? You know, do you treat people when you go to a restaurant with respect, and are you kind? You know, and I've seen, we've heard stories. This, you know, the Christian walks into the food place and they're like, you know, let's tell you about the gospel, blah, blah. Then they complain about the service, and then, you know, they leave a little business card, no tip, and, you know, all those kind of things and mixed signals, you know. So, you know, if I'm going to slide an invite or a business card out there, one, I want to make sure it communicates who our church is, and they say, oh, I think I'd like to, you know, visit a church like this, but also that you leave a great brand experience, because you're going out to represent your church, you're representing yourself, and you're representing Christ. And I firmly believe you want to make that a good experience. You know, of course you can say, you know, the service wasn't that great, but there's a kind way to do it. Make sure you tip correctly if you're going to, you know, send out your literature and stuff like that. You know, here's your 50 cents, what, you know. And that's all things that, you know, will probably be talked about at MinistryCOM and stuff like that. But, you know, you want your overall experience to be great, and it's not going to be perfect. And here's one thing that I will talk about. You know, there are some churches out there, and I've been involved with some of their meetings and their leadership stuff, and they talk about, and I won't name names, you know who you are. But sometimes I see it on the other side is they work too hard to make a great experience. You know, they go, it's almost overkill. It's like, you know, from the time you walk in the door, here comes that light shining down on you. You have the greeter. Everything is timed like a propaganda machine. And I think you could have an overkill in that. And here's the thing that goes against people that I know who've never been to church, and even have a great friend who's an unchurched guy, and he's walked in some of these churches. He said, I feel like I'm walking onto a car sales lot or something like that. You know, so you can go overboard. People are like, you know, the music cues in, the smoke machines roll, people walk out, and it's so timed perfect, everything's great, that I think you lose you overkill, you lose the essence of your brand too. So, you know, you don't want to be you don't want to do junk. You know, you do the best with what you have, with the tools you have. But you know, if you do have the resources and the money and the talent, you want to make sure that you don't go overboard on your brand. You need to, like, you know, we want to overkill it and oversell it, because that goes against you as well. I want to talk about two different brands. I'm going to talk about a large church and a smaller church that I know that have done some really effective branding. And the first one I want to talk about is Mars Hill in Seattle. You know, Martin Driscoll's church. You know, of course, I went through the Acts 29 network for the church planning. Awesome group of guys, just down to earth, real, gospel driven. You know, I know there's a lot of people theologically who might disagree with them. We're not getting into the theological thing, but the thing that I liked about Mars Hill is from the time I walked into Mars Hill when we went to our church plant training was everything that I'd seen previously online with Mark Driscoll and the people in Acts 29 matched up with Mars Hill and who they were. From, you know, their paper stuff to the brochures to the signage to the lights to the experience. Everything really captured that Seattle brand that they're communicating and their church brand and everything. So it all connected, and I appreciate that. And they've done a great job. And you and I had this conversation before we started the broadcast about how, again, we go into some churches and you have the men's ministry who wants their different logo. You have the children's who wants their different logo. So pretty soon you end up creating all these different little mini brands in your church, and it looks like it's discombobulated, and you don't know, are we going to the children's church? Are we going to the youth group church? What is that all about? Mm-hmm. And Mars Hill has done a fantastic job of keeping that, they have the M that might have changed, consistent through all of their marketing stuff, all their communication stuff. And so you could step into any one of those instances and you say, oh, this is Mars Hill. We understand this church. Another thing that I want to talk about Mars Hill is they did a study. I think it was Dateline came out and did a story on them, or maybe it was local news. I can't remember which it was, so I'd have to dig back. But they started asking people in the community and their church, what is Mars Hill about? Mm-hmm. And this is really cool because we tend to forget about this in our churches and stuff like that. We get so busy with just doing the ministry that we forget sometimes what it's about. But all these people they asked in the community, and all the people in the church said, what's Mars Hill about? And they said, Jesus. Mm. They said Jesus.
That works.
And because, I know Driscoll preaches Jesus. I know all our people, they have a hard process in order for you to be an elder at their church. But the thing that I thought was cool about it was that they were all able to say one thing. They're unified. So, maybe your church is, all churches hopefully are about Jesus, not ourselves or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I thought it was really cool that everyone was unified in that message. And I think that's what, as churches, when you talk about church branding, that's what we need to do. Everything needs to be unified, from what your preacher's saying, your pastor, children's pastor, your staff, your volunteers, the people in your community, all your marketing materials, all your communication efforts. I just firmly believe that should all connect the dots. And when people in the community say, what's my church about? They can say Jesus, or loving people, or serving, or whatever that is that you're trying to communicate. Right. And I think if you do that, that is an awesome way to go, but also you have an awesome church brand. The second church I want to talk about is the Dialogue Church. And when I was working, branding, Chad kind of relaunching it now and going through some stuff. But the Dialogue Church was one of those churches that was really different. A lot of people have come to me when it comes to church branding, and they ask for help and said, we want to be like the Purpose-Driven Church. We want to be like Saddleback. We want to be like Mars Hill. We want to be like Life Church TV. And I'm like, you really don't want to be those people. When I met with Steve Jesmer of the Dialogue Church, he said, we want to be the Dialogue Church. Mm-hmm. We want to be different. And so I worked with Steve. We went through all the questions. And it was really cool because he said, I don't want to be like everyone else. Help me communicate this. And so we worked on his brand identity logo, which is, it's kind of like a grunge-looking box with DC in it. Mm-hmm. And, orange, black, and grays were their colors because we want to do something kind of dark and different than a lot of the church brands that were out there, using the light stuff, and happy. And not say that Dialogue Church isn't happy, but they are also reaching a different crowd of people in our community than what we might have here in Oklahoma or California or Texas and so on. And everything they have done from the point that I've worked with them, and even now they have another guy helping out with their design work, all speaks the same message. So whether it's the kids, the children, the people on the street, they said that's the Dialogue Church. And they know that it's kind of a raw, authentic place to go where you can be yourself, where you can not only get the gospel, Steve preaches the message, he's strong about that, theologically sound, but also they said, we can go to this church and be ourselves, and that's what they've communicated through their branding. So, just a couple examples there of how that's worked out for church. Now, I see your wheel spinning, and so... I
think that the proof that your branding works is when the public can say who you are. Whether they agree with you or not, whether they like you or not, if the public can define who you are, then the branding works.
Right.
You've identified, and hopefully it's what you're trying to been presenting all along.
Absolutely.
But if you're got this hodgepodge, I did a workshop last year, and one of my top slides was a NASCAR card that's got the 5 million logos all over it. So if your church newsletter looks like this, it's a bad thing. If you've got 10,000 logos and 10,000 different brands on your church, nobody can look at that and say, "Oh, that's Nike. Oh, that's Walmart. Oh, that's American Airlines."
Exactly.
There's no continuity in all that.
Right. Well, you think about Nike, you bring them up as an example. They've been preaching just do it for 20 years or whatever. They come up with some variations. Like I really love the soccer one, Write Your Future. I'm a soccer fan, so I thought that was clever, but it's always centered around just do it. And they've sent that message throughout, 20 years or whatever since they've been around, maybe longer than that. One of the things I see about churches is they're continually changing. It's like AT&T. I was joking the other day when I was getting my iPhone, was the guys, he had this new shirt on, a new slogan. I said, you guys got a new slogan? He said, yeah. I said, yeah, I think I read the other day, in the 23 years you guys have been around, you've changed your slogan 22 times. And I see a lot of churches do that as well. They change their slogan, they change their identity, the logo, the look and feel. And you really need to first of all, you need to develop a great brand identity from the start. And I know, some smaller churches don't have those resources, but things have changed, over the years too. You used to have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to get all this stuff, websites, technology, but there's so many resources out there now that you can still do a great image. You can still create a great brand. And it's more than the logo in your brochure. It's about how your people are and the telephone calls and, how you treat people as they walk in. Are you welcoming, or do you, turn the cold shoulder, all that kind of stuff. All that goes to your brand experience. But you can do some really nice stuff now, and you don't have to spend $1 million to do it. And, that's what's important. But what a lot of churches do is they'll start changing that up, and people get confused. And you really need 3 to 5 years to really establish your brand in a community, because, it takes a while for people to get it. And, we get bombarded with messages all the time. Everyone's tired of, advertising and get hit up by, all the different stuff. So they turn it off. But if you're consistent and you keep that rolling, it's going to help people understand who you are, and they're going to remember you. But if you're changing it every other week, like I kind of do my website, we joke about that a lot. But anyways, that's a whole other topic, is that you want to stay consistent. My brand image always stays consistent, even though the design might change, with the creative stuff on my site. The message is always the same. And, it's kind of like when we talk about using branding, which brings up another thing. I don't know how we're doing on time. And you just kind of 5 more minutes. One thing I want to go in is that real quick, because this is something that really hit me a few years after I was doing all this church branding stuff, and this came up, and I want to encourage all the churches to do this, is we can get so much involved with the branding, the techniques, the flash, the pomp, the, tightly knit experience, whatever you want to call it. And I think the message always needs to be on Jesus. I think if you're a church, it always needs to be on the gospel. And I think sometimes what happens is, when Life Church started doing all that stuff, that's about the time I got into church branding. Is, I was doing all this corporate stuff for BMW, Arnold Palmer, PGA Golf Course, and stuff like that. And I said, I want to do this for churches, not because I want them to be the coolest kid on the block, but because I thought the days of flannel grass were over, and the 17th generation MIDI files of, whatever the latest song was. I thought, it was a change. And Life Church was one of the innovative people who stepped forward and says, we're going to do this differently. And it's been amazing. But I've seen churches get so wrapped up in that we want to be cool, from the carpet color to the music to the timing, that they forget all about the message that's always consistent, and that's Jesus and preaching the gospel. So, when I teach in my courses, or when I share with church planners or people in ministries, you got to have that balance. You always want to keep that message the same, the gospel. It's about His story, not our story. But how do you wrap in your church's story and what you're about along with the gospel? And I think if you stay focused on the gospel and you be true to who you are, it's going to help. But stay and keep that consistent. I don't know if you got any thoughts you want to throw out on there.
No, that's. I think in the commercial world, branding is a little bit easier because they can be a lot more overt in who their customer is, who their market is. BMW can say, we're BMW, this is our market, not everybody can afford a BMW, nobody deserves a BMW, too bad.
Yeah.
They don't have to have this guilt trip that everybody should drive a BMW or we didn't market it right. With churches, I think we kind of have that feeling of, okay, we may be a young hip church, but that means we're insulting old people.
Right.
And it's like, well, no, it just means that we're targeting, what we're
younger
targeting
people
here. So I think it's just a lot easier in the commercial world to really be strong in that brand.
Right.
Now, something that I would throw a question for you here, and we've got a couple of minutes, but a question we talked about earlier about when you're building logos for your church. How many logos? How do you deal with every ministry wants its own brand? Every ministry wants its own logo. Every ministry wants its own feel. How do we deal with that?
Well, that's a real tough question, Terrell. Is that we're talking about how so many people want their own identity, and I think the most important step is to bring in a professional and help you assess that needs. With Branding Shed, what I do is I try to get down to questions of who the person is and who they are really. And, that was one of the things I was going to tell you for tips is you got to discover who you are really. Mm-hmm. Now, when you start having different ministry people who are in charge of their roles or positions or whatever start saying, we want our own thing, I think you just have to be strong and say, no, we want to commit to a unified look and feel for our ministries. Now, youth group, I told you about this. Sometimes I think the youth group can kind of do something a little off the hook or wild, mm-hmm. but still you want to try to find some way to tie it in with your overall church, because you're not promoting the men's ministry, you're not promoting the youth group. While those are all functions or features of your church, benefits, whatever you want to call them, right. Ministries, right. You always want to be trying to communicate about your church, especially in your community. So, I want to say hire a professional to help you do that. Hire a professional to help you design. Even if you end up having creative people in your church who can help out, they can do a lot of the print materials and design. Is hire a branding specialist who will create an identity where you can maybe change up that icon identifier and put, let's just say Life Church, for example, they have, their little logo with LC. Mm-hmm. They could put men's next to it, women's, children's, so on and so on, and it would always be consistent. It'd still look professional and great, and it would communicate the same story throughout. So mm-hmm. I challenge people to think about that way. The logo is just a part of the brand experience, but try to create a logo that you can use that kids will be happy to wear on their T-shirts and their hats. Try to create an identity where, if you're a baby boomer or an older person, you can say, I understand that and I want to wear that. So I think it's just really sitting down and doing some heart-to-heart talk with yourself and your staff, and then trying to determine how can we create an identity that is consistent across the board. And it's not an easy task. If I had the quick and easy answer, I could give it to you, but it's just not,
It's tough. Branding is tough, and logo design's even harder. I'm going to take a little break here. I'm going to ask if you've got questions, get them on the forum here. We've got a couple coming on the forum now. If you're not logged into the forum, then you can email info@ministrycom.org, and I'll get those here. If you got questions for James on branding or on logo design, this is your shot here. Make another pitch for the conference. MinistryCOM's coming up October in Dallas, 20th to 22nd. The early bird discount expires at the end of July. And I put a little rant in my email on my blog this week, but the airline industry has trained us to wait till the last minute, and the best deals are always the very last second. And I think that it's bad in two ways. From the business point of view, it's bad because you're training your customers to not trust you and wait till the last minute. And the second thing is it kind of screws your loyal customers that do come early and do pay early. Right. So I'm going to tell you all right now, and this is on tape, so you guys can catch me if I lied to you, but we won't extend the early bird deadline. We're not going to offer last-minute premiums. We've tried to price MinistryCOM fairly. If price is an issue, contact me. But we don't do discounts. We don't give out secret codes to bloggers. Our guest speakers aren't going to be doing secret codes the week before the conference. We won't have a 50% off. If you want to come to MinistryCOM, we'd love to have you. If you want the best price, register between now and the end of the month. If you have registered, then, man, we love you, and we really appreciate people that register early and help us plan. Right. This year we will have, following these topics, Richard Rising is going to be available. He's going to give a workshop on Church Marketing 101. He wrote a book on church marketing. That's some great material there. Michael Buckingham was going to try and be with us on this webcast, but we had some conflicts with the technology and the schedules and everything. Michael Buckingham is doing a workshop specifically on logo design. So if you are trying to build logos and you need help, Michael's got some great resources for you there. James will be here talking about building a rocking website. Yep. That's kind of one of his specialties, his website. And then I'll do a session on usable websites and how to design a website that can be used and not just win design awards here. So let's go ahead and see what kind of questions we've got coming in here. Let's see. Dialogue Church website?
That is thedc.tv, I believe. So thedc.tv. Or you can just type in thedialoguechurch.com. Should take you to, they have several domains, should lead you to the promised land as far as their stuff goes.
Okay, do you send churches away when they're still confused about their identity, like mission statement, vision, slogan, or do you consult them through it?
It depends if they're asking for free or if they're willing to pay. That's the thing is, with what I've done is different from a lot of designers. There's a lot of great designers out there who can do awesome logos and graphic design. My specialty is not only I'm not trying to be humble now, but I do great logo stuff because I think through it. But the reason their logos are great is because I spend time helping people identify those needs. So for me, it's different. I spend more time at the front end getting to know what the church is, hearing their story, listening to what they're about, asking the hard questions, and I help them move through that statement to where we say, okay, this is exactly who you are. Everything we have now is unified, and let's take it from there and start creating the design and the pieces from that. So, my process is a little different. I like doing research because, by doing all that up front, it saves you a lot of headaches down the road. So
yeah. There's a question here that says, is it possible to overbrand and make a religion look secular and commercial?
Wow, that's a good question. Yes, you can. Again, here's an example. My buddy, I won't name his name, but we've had many conversations where, again, he's gone to some of these churches and he's like, wow, it's like I said earlier, walking into a used car sales lot or, some kind of carnival and stuff like that. And he's one of those guys, he knows more about the Bible than most Christians I know. He's quote unquote doesn't call himself a Christian. He struggled with some things, but part of the reason why he's hesitant to go to some of these churches, especially locally where we have some really great churches that are awesome, is they look too flashy. They look overdone. He's like, what are you going to sell me on now? So, is it just all about wanting my money? And then, there are people, this is another, catch-22 situation. People say, wow, you're spending all your money on that flashy stuff. And, aren't you supposed to be good stewards of God's money and blah, blah, blah. And so I think you can have overkill. I don't think you need to go cheap or ugly just because you want to be a good steward. But I also want to say, if you spend too much time trying to put on too much makeup, that's going to work against you. So try to balance it out. Don't be, what's a word that Buckingham always uses? Mediocre. Don't be mediocre. Don't be sorry in what you're doing, but don't be too polished either. So
I know I don't consider myself a branding expert, but as we built websites for churches and for different nonprofits, and we spend a lot of time. They come in and say, with this really nice looking design, this real clean modern design, we want all the people to be stock photos. And it's like, I can build you a very beautiful, very clean modern site. But if your average attendee in your church is, a 65-year-old person,
right?
Then this isn't a fair website. Visitors will come to your website, will come visit your church. It won't be what you promised them, and I would much rather identify who you really are and let's make the best of who we are. If you're trying to move someplace else so we can get a blend from where you are to where you're trying to be.
Right.
But so often people come to us on the website world and they want a website that looks like that church over there.
Right.
They're not that church over there. And,
right.
And I'm basically, if I build what they want, I'm lying to people.
Exactly.
I'm showing these beautiful young yuppies with their Starbucks coffee and their flip flops on, and you get there and it's a bunch of old men wearing suits and white shirts and dark ties, and it's like, that wasn't what the brochure said.
Yeah, that's what I call the bait and switch, and we know what that means. And it's happened a lot because I actually I started turning down churches who would contact me and say, we want to look like this church. And we'd start doing a little analysis. I'm like, you're not that church. Well, make us look like that. I'm sorry, I can't work with you, because here's what happened. And I'll tell everyone about a free PDF I have that needs to be updated here in a few minutes. But that's what happens a lot. Is everyone goes and gets these stock photos and they show this interracial, interdenominational, multicultural church.
Multicultural church.
And I've been into these churches that show, African Americans or Asian Americans or, different people. And you walk in, it's like, wow, I don't see any black people or Asian people or Dutch people. I'm Dutch, but it's weird. It's like you're selling what you want to be, and that's goes back to my question on branding: is who are you really? That's the first thing I'm going to ask churches who want to work with me, and I encourage other designers and brand people that work with churches or companies to ask, who are you really? Let's start doing analysis. Let's start asking people in the community. Let's ask people in your church, because for myself, I used to think of myself as a Harley Davidson, tough as heck guy on a motorcycle. I had the T-shirts, I had the little miniature motorcycles, but I didn't have a motorcycle. I had all the gear and I had to talk down. I got the tattoo, but I was a poser. In my head, I thought I was this Harley guy, but I'm not. And so I stopped trying to advertise that because I don't even own a motorcycle. So it's the same thing with churches. Don't start throwing in photographs or terminology or content that paints you as something that you're not.
Okay, we got a couple questions here on logo design. How do you approach colors when designing a logo and branding? what are the elements that constitute a logo? You might kind of talk about some of the, as you're building logos, what are some of the factors?
And that's great. Let me tell you what makes a great logo. And I think a lot of churches need to know this as well as businesses. You have a lot of designers out there who can do some really cool stuff. And with the web, you kind of can do a lot of wild stuff. But it doesn't translate over to print. And so if you go to jamesdalman.com, which is my website, and give me a self-promotion, and it's not about my promotion, it's showing you samples of the logos I've done, because that's really the best ways to actually see them. I should have brought some samples to show online or the screen, but one, your logo needs to work in black and white. It needs to work in one color, and it can also work in many colors. It needs to work at the size of a postage stamp as well as a billboard size. It needs to work for embroidery, and I used to do embroidery and digitizing, and a lot of things don't work that way. It needs to work for screen printing. So, when you're talking about developing a logo, I see a lot of designers do these really cool things. It's 3D. It's got all these shadows and gradients and blends. But then when you actually print it on something like a newspaper, or you have to print it in house, it looks like a big vomitous blob of you don't know what. And so when you're talking about logos, like colors, picking the colors for your ministry, I'm going to be honest here, there's a lot of designers who'll say, well, we'll do all this, really cool stuff and the warm feelings and this and that. You know what? It really doesn't matter. I know people get tied down. We want this Pantone blue of this and this is color. Leave that for John Deere. They got to have that exact color. They got millions of dollars to promote it. I think for a church, is just trying to figure out, if you're a kind of a happy church, conservative, use conservative colors, use happy colors. If you're kind of an underground, one of those church plants or churches who do a lot of the Gregorian chants and the incense, stuff like that, you're probably going to use darker colors, earth tones, things like that. So kind of just got to feel for what you're doing. Now, there is a website for people just, who are colorblind, don't know how to work colors together. If they just want to kind of play around and figure out, this is our color hue or chart, is colorlovers.com, and it's COLOUR lovers.com, I believe. So you can get some different palettes and stuff like that. But don't get so bogged down initially on the colors as, making sure that you have a logo that's going to work across the board. Because I see a lot of people who have spent, thousands of dollars to the my logo for $1.com logos, and they don't work across the board. They blow it up and it looks horrible. They try to make it smaller. It looks horrible. They put it, in one color. You can't see what it is. So,
and I think that's what I've seen, example or a proof of a bad logo designer is they tend to do way too much detail.
Right.
They're designing this, on a Mac in Photoshop on a 21-inch screen or a 70-inch screen, and the thing's got 9,000 layers. It's got 9,000 colors. So it's beautiful, as a high-res graphic image. But when you try and convert that to a hat or a silkscreen on a T-shirt, then suddenly it just falls apart.
Right.
And the really good logos you think about, the strongest brands out there, the Nikes, the BMWs, those are really plain logos.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of elements to those. And I think people try and assume that, a good logo will make us a good brand.
Yeah.
And it's not that way. The reason that Nike is so great is not because of that creative swoosh. It's because of the billions of dollars they put into making that swoosh popular.
Right.
IBM has got, a terrible logo. But for decades, they were a powerhouse because the way they lived their brand, not because of the way they picked, because the color blue they picked.
Right.
The blue did reflect, the market they wanted to target. But, take letters IBM, put lines across them, that wasn't the world's top creativity.
Right.
But when you live that brand so strong, then that logo just becomes you.
Right.
And people think that if I pay more for a logo and get a better logo, then I will be a better brand. And
that's not always the case. And that's the thing is I tell a lot of people is, go out there and look at, some of the brands that have been around for 200 years. Coca-Cola, for example, if you cut out a lot of the, you take the color away from it and you take just a section of it, you can identify that's Coca-Cola. Same thing with John Deere, Mac, Starbucks, Harley Davidson, BMW. If you start really looking at some of these brands that have been around for a while and they're strong and have set a consistent message, simple. It's simple. And that's, my work is simple. I think you should have a simple logo. If you get too complex, it just doesn't really do a whole lot for you. So keep it simple. Same thing with your brand. Keep it simple, keep it clear, and keep it effective and concise.
Okay, let's see what else we got going here.
Hey, real quick, I want to tell everyone, because I don't know if they'll jump off the broadcast or not. You could go to brandedchurch.com, and of course you could find us through my website and other venues as well. But I had a book that I did about, it was 1995, 96 as a part of my church plant training, and I started seeing a lot of ministries say, how do we learn about this stuff, and how do we learn about branding and marketing? And I'm going to say that the free PDF is outdated because, when I was talking about websites then, it was for the website CMSs that are available now, like with the stuff you do now. Right. With Main Street, it's all, you could do it with WordPress and do really smashing looking sites, great CMS system for websites, and so a lot of that stuff that I wrote about then is outdated, but a lot of the principles I'm talking about, branding and logos, it's all in there. So you can go to brandedchurch.com and download that free PDF. I am going to be working on a new one that I'm going to make available. It's all updated, new information. Back then the social media wasn't going on and all that kind of stuff, Twitter. Right. So it's going to be updated. I know I've promised some people it's been in the works for years, but when you get busy and God gives you all these different things, it's kind of hard to go back. But I am going to do that this year. But get that book and just kind of look through it, because a lot of it, it's not like an in-depth book where it's going to take you years to read. It's practical, informative, and it's stuff that you can use today. So it's all the stuff we're talking about's in there. So thanks for letting me share that.
Got another good question for you here. Our church is working on a strategic plan, which is great. How can I bring branding to their attention?
Oh, can you clarify that? Branding to the committee, or?
I think the idea of branding as part of the strategic plan. I mean, to me, it's wonderful, because so many times when we talk to people about branding, it forces them back to that strategic. Who are we? Who are we trying to be? And the people that I'm working with on the branding team are usually just artists who don't really have the big picture, or who aren't allowed to dream. I mean, you need the boss's boss to be in this meeting.
Right.
And there's like, make us a logo, make us a brand, and give us 3 copies, and we'll sign it in the morning. And I think most of where I see branding go wrong is because strategic stuff wasn't done first. We don't know who we are. We don't know what, we want our one thing to be.
Right.
And you don't really have to call it branding so much. If you're talking about strategic people, if you can just get them to figure out who we are, what people think of, when they hear about us, you can build a brand off of that. You don't have to develop a brand. You don't have to do strategy for the brand. You just got to have a strategy that you can then build a brand into. I'm putting words in your mouth.
No, I think you're hitting it. Is the first thing you need to know is who you are and what you want to communicate and what your church is about and what your mission is. And, as part of the branding process I ask those questions. So, if you don't know where you want to go, how can you develop a brand that fits that? Well, we want to, and the thing is, a lot of churches too they get focused. Well, we want to be the best. We have a service ministry serving. We want to do a marketplace ministry. No, don't get so focused on doing so much stuff that you get bogged down. Who are you? What's your one unified message? And that's part of communication. That's a part of strategy. Define that. And then, if you're talking about with your group, committee, your team, is to say, now we need to develop a brand that's centered on this strategy. Now, here's a hard piece about it. What if your church, and you've been around for 10, 15 years, we used to go to a big church. It says they brought in these people and they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars asking people in the neighborhood about them. They thought they were a good serving church, helping people in the community. People in the community said, oh, that's the big white rich church that we don't want to go to. And so they're like, oh, we need to rebrand. The hard part is when you've already got that history established in a community like that, is it's just going to take you time to redevelop that. So that's why, one, that strategy part's important. You need to define who you are, and it's going to take time to rebrand yourself in order to get into people's mind, oh, they've changed, or they're a different brand than they were 20 years ago. So I think it's just telling the people on your staff or your team or the powers that be is that, brand is important for our church, and that is going to help draw people in. It is going to help people. Honestly, I don't want to give a guarantee, but it will help people give to your church, to be involved with your church, to serve in your church, because they can say, this is a church I identify with. And, that I can't promise numbers. It might be 2 people or 2,000, but all those small steps, it's just one piece of the puzzle that you need to do as a church to get out there. So,
and one of the articles I read, I can't remember whose book I was reading about branding, but the preface was, you already have a brand.
Right.
People already have an opinion about you.
Absolutely.
And your brand may be unknown. I mean, your brand may be never heard of you, but you already have a brand. And so when you rebrand, you're not just create a new logo and now I'm somebody else.
Right.
And that's where people like AT&T, well, I've known AT&T for 30, 40 years. I already have an opinion, and they can create a new tagline, new slogan, but I was a customer of theirs for a long time, and I'm not anymore, and there's reasons. And so a new tagline, new logo doesn't change, all the baggage I carry with them.
Right. We'll talk,
they may change, if they get leadership to change and they do something different, then they may become a different brand, and I may become a loyal customer again. That's not impossible. But by just bringing out a new logo, I don't suddenly say, "Oh, okay, well, it's a whole different company."
Right.
AT&T.
We'll think of the house analogy. When you're shopping for a house or you go out to get a house, the house might have cracks. There might be problems in the foundation. You might have a bad septic tank. The air conditioner won't work. Well, you can put new siding or paint on there, and it can look brand new, but you still have those same foundational problems, those same cracks, that same septic tank problems. So even though you throw a fresh coat of paint on there, people might say, "Wow, that looks nice." You still got those same problems. And that, the paint in and of itself is not going to sell your church. So you're going to have to work going through that process again of getting out there in the community. Say you haven't been known for a serving church and you want to be known as a serving church. The only way you can do that is by serving, getting out there. So you can, like you said, you can throw a new logo out there and say, "We are a serving church. Look at us in the community," billboards, stickers, and all that. People still don't care. Oh, they're not a serving church because here's our experience with them. Yeah. And we talk about brand experience. Get in there and start washing feet. Get in your community and start doing stuff. That's the only way you can change that.
What is your email address? If people want to ask you questions after this session's over, which is coming up real quick.
Okay.
How do they get a hold of you?
James@brandingshed.com.
James@brandingshed.com. All right?
Yeah.
Because we got a few more questions we can't answer. I did see a question about is WordPress just for blogging? And that's a whole separate session. We're huge WordPress fans. WordPress has got so much capacity now in the latest versions. We've built some very elaborate websites. The people that don't think WordPress can do real websites just don't know how to use the current versions.
Right.
If you want to know more about that, contact me either at MinistryCOM or at MainStreetOpen.com, and we can show you some really impressive stuff.
And
we got James on the James@brandingshed.com.
Okay.
Let me go ahead and wrap this thing up.
Okay.
James, I do appreciate your time.
Thanks
I appreciate you sharing with us. James will be at MinistryCOM in October. He'll be talking about building websites. But we'll also have sessions on church branding, church marketing. We'll have sessions on logo design. Next month's live webcast will be Thursday, August 19th. It'll be again at noon Central Time, which is whatever time you saw at this time. Evan McBroom is going to be with us via Skype. We'll keep our fingers crossed the technology works. Evan's going to introduce the basic training track. If you're new to church communications, or if you know someone who's new to church communications, this is going to be a great session because Evan's kind of got some of the very basics what you need to know to get in church communications, and he'll talk about some of that. We'll do some Q&A. Thursday, August 19th. It's the third Thursday of August, and you can sign up for email reminders on the website. Also, please invite a friend. And register for MinistryCOM. Deadline's coming up. Well, we want to see those registrations come in. So thank you very much. We'll see you next month.
Thanks.